So today I'm really lucky to have the opportunity to interview Phil Lewis. Phil Lewis is the founder of a fantastic organisation called Corporate Punk, which is a leading global organisation for driving responsive, resilient innovation in companies large and small all around the world. I've known Phil for a few years now, and I know that his work is really unique and high impact, very agile, and very much a great focus on people and ethical business as well. And with Phil's experience in the business world and as an entrepreneur in himself, I thought he'd be a great person to share his perspective and experience of mental health with a spin on impact culture and organisations. So Phil, thank you for making the time to share your experience and wisdom with us today. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words and your background?
Well, great to have the opportunity to chat with you about what I think is a really important subject. So my own background is 22 years, I think it is now, in both the creative industries and the consulting industries. Both industries, I think it is fair to say, that haven't done a great job of looking after their people very well over the years. And the interesting thing for me about my journey, and the reason I set Corporate Punk up, was ultimately I was working with loads of smart people who are really talented and had loads of good ideas and loads of energy to bring to their businesses. And yet I was watching those businesses that could have benefited from that energy and that experience, the ideas and the talent, simply trample them out of people. And I couldn't work out why that is. And so, the answer is actually quite complicated. It's to do with things like, the systems they build and the structures they build, and also to an extent their attitudes to things like mental health and well-being. But I found in Corporate Punk really with a view to going, there's got to be a better way to do business, and actually a better way to do business that makes people more happy, treats them like human beings, actually as a result of that sees improvements to productivity and sees improvements in the end to profitability. And we've been doing that work for 5 years now, pretty successfully.
Brilliant, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Phil. What would you say mental health is to you? And the reason why I ask you this is because there still are very different understandings and perspectives of what mental health means. So with your fantastic experience of working with many companies, what's mental health to you, and why do you think people should do more about it?
Well, I can't give you the all-encompassing definition of mental health. I'm sure there's loads of super smart professionals and health practitioners out there that can do this, but I'll give you my take. And my take on it is that really mental health means two things, right? So the first thing, and both of them actually are the same concept as punk. So the first thing is actually about energy. Do I have positive energy to bring into my life and to bring into my work every day? And do I feel that that energy is, serving me and serving the people around me? So poor mental health shows itself. You see it in depression, for example, in really low levels of energy. But burnout is what happens when energy, just gets exhausted. The second thing actually is about authenticity, which is the other thing that underpins punk. So an authenticity in this context means the ability to be your natural self every day that you go into work. So for me, great mental health is not actually having to put on the masks, not having to hide from colleagues, not having to be anything other than you actually are, knowing that what you are is good enough, And I think that, we call our business Corporate Punk just because ultimately we want it to be about helping organisations to be their natural selves. But the level of mental health, I think, and I know this from my own personal experience as well, that actually having great mental health means I've got energy and I've got that authenticity and I know who I am naturally. When my mental health has been bad in the past, I've tipped to being perhaps a less true version of who I am, and my energy's been a lot lower, partly as a result. So that's my take on it.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Phil. That's brilliant explanation there, and a brilliant perspective. So now let's transfer the conversation a little bit into your deep expertise in the change, organisational development, and impact culture arena. Where does mental health sit in that world, from your perspective?
So we talk about impact culture, Corporate Punk, as being really culture is like, well, I'll give you the example, I'll give you a story actually. So David Foster Wallace tells this great story of two young fish swimming along in the sea, right? And this older fish goes past them. The older fish says to them, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swing on for a bit. And then one says to the other, "Hey, what's water?" And that feels to me like what organisational culture actually is. It's the environment, it's all of the implicit stuff about which we're asked to, within which we're asked to work every day. That can be narratives, it can be legends, it can be implied hierarchies, it can be implied priorities, it can be about sometimes even just the true purpose of the organisation is hidden. All that stuff kind of contributes to culture, right? So impact culture is where the water, if you will, is at the right temperature to be able to get the best work out of people within it. So we talk about impact cultures as being ones, again, that gear businesses for responsiveness, for resilience, and for innovation. Now, if you take mental health then, you would go, well, you know, mental health is basically good mental health is a building block of any impact culture. If you've got people who aren't feeling particularly resilient, for example, because their mental health is suffering for whatever reason, well, almost like whatever you do environmentally, you're not going to be able to compensate fully for that, right? So again, looking after your people at the individual level and helping them bring the best out of themselves and helping them support each other is almost like a prerequisite. So for me, you know, the work that we do in organisational change goes to things like how are you structured, and what are your systems and processes, and how are your leaders behaving, and what are the hidden incentives in the machine, all those sorts of things and things that we look at and help people to crack. But a precondition of that is that people are in a place energetically to be able to do that, and that they're in a place to be able to lean into these discussions, feel good about themselves, feel good about other people, and therefore feel energized and authentic in being able to do that change work. So for me, they're innately linked, but at the same time, mental health is a foundation and a cornerstone of effective organisational culture.
Fantastic. Thank you, Phil. Brilliant. Really appreciate you sharing this with us. Now, from your perspective, are there maybe 2 or 3 key tips or pieces of advice you would give to other business leaders and other working adults around supporting mental well-being through change and impact culture?
Well, I think in terms of at a cultural level, which is to say really at the level of how people are working together, I think sometimes the stuff that actually you're already seeing underway in organisations is really healthy. So promoting conversations about mental health and well-being, I think, is probably the number one thing.
Yeah,
and encouraging people and giving them tools. I know you're doing some fantastic work in this space, giving them tools through which they can actually look at and quantify how they're feeling and quantify the contribution that their work life is making to their health and understand the relationships between their mental health and productivity. Those sorts of conversations, I think, are absolutely essential. A note of caution, I think, for me anyway, is that the conversation about mental health has to come from a place of we're gonna make this optimal. We want to try and find fixes. We want to try and find resolutions, and we want to be able to have a healthy balance in our culture. You know, a healthy culture is not a stress-free culture, for example. There's ample evidence to support the fact that a little bit of stress in an environment actually does a lot of good for people's development, for their sense of energy, for their sense of accomplishment, all those sorts of things. So I think the conversations that we need to be having about mental health in the workplace are conversations that say, A, this is really important. B, let's get practical on it. So how do we connect? You know, the question of mental health, the question of productivity, for example. And then thirdly, how do we strike the right balance here, so at the same time we're creating an environment which actually is still encouraging and motivating people to do their best work, and not ruling out things like a little bit of stress that actually can be very, very beneficial for the human spirit. So those things for me, again, feel like the integral bits of work for businesses to be doing at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you, Phil.
Oh, can I say one more thing? Sorry.
Yeah,
just also particularly important given what's going on. I mean, I think what we're going to see with remote working, what we're going to see with all the sort of post-COVID-19 stuff is people feeling perhaps more isolated, more disconnected from colleagues, more uncertain about the future, all those kind of things. And you know, remote working and productivity is its own question. And uncertainty about the future only means that we have to have more conversations about things like mental health as well. So I think this is only going to become more important actually in the coming weeks and months, not less important.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Phil. And just to reinforce or re-incentivize your points for our audience. Historically, a lot of companies have only been, unfortunately, only been doing employee well-being and mental health stuff as a tick box exercise. Fact. They don't really care about people. They're very much a short-term profit focus first, and that's been a real shame to see that in organisations. And that's been around for quite a long time. Not all organisations are like this, but there are a number, unfortunately. But the good news is that in recent years we're now blessed with fantastic research and insights that have come out to show that the companies that really do invest in supporting mental health, employee well-being, they actually are seeing a significant increase in productivity. Increased productivity drives increased profit. So now people can actually do the right thing and look after their staff properly, and actually they can make more money. So we're expecting to see a big increase when this message gets out there more, that companies will be willing and really doing more to properly transform their companies from a well-being perspective.
I have a related point on that. I think 2014, I think it was, Harvard Business Review published a useful thing for once that talked about how in the 21st century, success is driven by two things. It's driven by prioritizing increasing revenues over decreasing cost and competing on differentiators over the price, right? And what I heard in that was, hang on a second, it's an organization's ability to solve difficult problems in an original way. It's an organization's ability to innovate, to create, to get new products to market really quickly are the things that are going to help organizations get ahead, stay ahead kind of thing. So if you then go, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, what that means is you have to have people who are able to be really adaptive, really energized, and really creative every day when they come into work, right? Now, therefore, treating your people like robots or treating your people like numbers on a spreadsheet, like automatons on a factory production line, and just going, work harder, work harder, work harder, gets you precisely nowhere, because all you're doing then is actually driving out that creative, that innovative capability, driving out their ability to actually bring their best value to work, and actually doing it again is compromising your competitive advantage. So I think it goes beyond just productivity into kind of almost about how generative can people be coming to work as well.
Definitely, I completely agree with you. Thank you for sharing that, Phil. Right, and my next question for you today was, if you're comfortable sharing a bit on this, Phil, are there any good or bad experiences of mental health that you'd be comfortable to share with us today?
Well, I mean, I always say that I've never learned the lesson the easy way, right? So I've always been a very driven character. I've always wanted to get ahead. I'm very ambitious in terms of my business, but I've been ambitious for years and years before that. I'm not even just financially ambitious, like intellectually ambitious, and want to work with great people, and I want my work to have impact and all that kind of stuff. A consequence of that is, I've had quite serious bouts of depression over the course of the last 20 years. One when a business partnership fell apart a few years ago, and that was extremely rough and took me about a year from. And I've burned out as well in the past, in a relatively serious way. And it's an ongoing journey for me, because it's an ongoing journey for me to be able to go, how do I balance the drive and the ambition that I've got with the need to look after myself? And it's taken a very, very long time for me to even start to join the dots between looking after myself, into my own behaviour, my own habits, that looking after myself actually only increases my ability to fulfill those drives and those ambitions. That's been a really, really long journey. I remember reading something that Bono from U2 said, and people have lots of views on U2, but he does say some very smart things, old Bono. And he said, you know, when he was 50, he realised that he had to stop treating his body like an inconvenience. And I thought this was a really, really brilliant kind of encapsulation of how ambitious people can often view their bodies, particularly when their bodies are telling them things like, please slow down.
Yes.
I'm not coping here very well with what's going on
Yes.
around me. So for me, it's been a lifelong journey to understand that looking after myself is worthwhile and important, and actually will only help me stay the course, really. And I don't think that's uncommon, but it's been a hard journey that at times, I would say, but one that I'm sort of very aware of. Do you know what I mean? I have tried to carry the lessons of that forward in some way in my life.
Yeah, brilliant, amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Phil. And it's just on my own mental health journey over the years, it's amazing, really, that the more we open up about this stuff and make it okay to talk about it and okay to share and not be ashamed of it, and actually how many other people either are or have been in the same boat, and very successful people like your good self as well. You know, this topic can destroy lives, you know, if even the perceived most successful and happiest people, you know, a personal trauma can change things overnight, for example. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Phil. You've been very kind of your sharing with us today. I have a final question, if I may, and it's really on the vein of, what advice would you give to someone who might be concerned about their own mental health at the moment, or maybe someone in their wider circle of influence? Could be one of their colleagues, a teammate, a line report at work, or even outside of work, a friend or a family member. Any advice you'd give them?
Okay. I mean, I would say one thing just for everybody in general. My great life lesson has been listen to your body, right? That's my kind of ongoing insight, I suppose, is that my physical condition gives me a huge insight into my mental and emotional condition, and your body's sending you signals all the time. I think to your direct question, the one piece of advice I would actually give is, don't be afraid, particularly if you're with somebody who you think is suffering, don't be afraid to have a pretty direct conversation about that. I think sometimes people who are going through a really tough time, it can take a little bit of time for them to actually open up about how they're feeling. And I think gently circling back around sometimes more than once and having quite a direct conversation about what you're perceiving. The intent behind that is pure, and the purity of intent is always the thing that people pick up on in the end. Do you know what I mean? However, the immediate reaction is the purity of intent is the thing that comes through. So I would just say that thing. I would say a combination of being gentle persistence and direct conversation sometimes is actually the way to help other people have the conversations that they need to have.
Yeah, fantastic, brilliant. Thank you, Phil. Well, it's been brilliant to hear of your successes, your experience, and your perspective on not just mental health, but where that can sit in an individual person's life, but also on a much larger scale within an organisation. And it's great to hear your experience as a leading global expert on impact culture and organisational change. So thank you for making the time today, Phil. And obviously, keep well, and I will no doubt speak to you again soon.
I look forward to it.